Car salesman, what's the most outrageous thing anyone has done while out on a test drive? Story 1. So I've only been selling cars for a little over a year now, and some of the stories on here are already pretty good, but I'll add my best one so far. A normal-looking dude comes into the dealership. I sell new cars, not used ones, and wants to look at an SUV. The company I work for makes 4 different models of SUV. This guy wanted to see our midsize model. I take him out to the lot with the keys, and we're looking around the car. "How do you think I could fit back here?" Just stops the hatch on the back and says to me, "How much Coke, F to T, like, if you had to guess?" I kind of laughed and said, I don't really know that much about Coke, but I think you can load up to 1,500 pounds in here. He seemed satisfied with the answer, and at this point, everything had made me feel like that was just a joke. Well, it wasn't. We go on the test drive, and he gets on the freeway and starts going fast. We were up over 100 miles per hour, weaving through cars. I'm freaking the frick out, telling him to stop, thinking that I'm being pranked by Pepsi Max and Jeff Gordon. Cop lights light up behind us, and I'm honestly relieved. But he is not slowing down. We get close to an exit, about to pass it, and he cuts the wheel and barely makes the exit. The cop misses it and screeches to a stop, starts backing up. But we are down the off-ramp, and he cuts off to a side street fairly quickly. Couple more turns, and he stops the car and tells me to get the frick out. I literally can't move. I can't process what he's saying, and I'm frozen. He gets out of the car and starts coming over to my side of the car, and this is where I should have just hopped over to the passenger side, or even just locked the freaking doors. But I didn't. I'm paralyzed. He opens my door and grabs my feet and starts pulling me out of the car. This is where I finally kick into action. I grab my seat and the handle on the ceiling, but the guy is still pulling my legs, hard, just like I'm pulling yours right now. Story 2. Not a salesman, but once I went to a Mazda dealership to test drive an RX-8. The salesman was a talkative dude, and to make conversation, I asked him what was the craziest thing he's seen on the job. He told me he let a guy test drive an RX-8 as well, and that the dude absolutely loved it. Before buying it, though, he had to go show his mom to see if she would approve. Dude asked the salesman, "Can I go show this to my mom to see if she approves?" Salesman said, "Of course." The dude doesn't come back after a few hours, so the salesman calls him up, and the dude lets him know he's on his way to New Orleans to show his mom. The dealership was in South Texas. The dude shows up a day or so later and buys the car. Salesman is relieved because he would have been fired and then some. Story 3. A year or so ago, an old man was test driving an F-150, and when we got back to the lot, he insisted on backing it into the parking space himself. There was a BMW behind us, and it looked like he was going to hit it, so I offered to get out and move it. "I'm not going to hit it," he said. "Sir, we are getting awfully close. Put the vehicle in park for me." "I'm not going to hit the dang car." Crunch. I basically said, "Well, there it was," and hopped out. Showed him the damage, and he insisted he didn't do it. I think he was just embarrassed and panicked a bit. I would have worked something out with him since the damage wasn't all that bad, but he called me a liar, hopped in his truck, and left. So I called the police. He wound up paying a couple $100 for the damage. Story 4. Had a guy show up on a fairly nice Harley-Davidson without a shirt on. Nobody helped him, so I offered to. He wanted to drive one of our top-end cars, $320,000 Rolls-Royce Ghost. I got a service bag, the ones that protect the seats from the mechanic's grime, and let him drive it. We got up to about 140 miles per hour on a public road before I told him he needed to buy it before hitting 150 miles per hour. We went back to the dealership, he went to his bike and wrote us a check. We delivered the car to his house that night and have been buying cars from the dealership ever since. He's also purchased a 2014 Porsche 911 Turbo S Maserati Gran Turismo MC Stardale convertible or Grand Cabriolet, depending on where you're from, and an Aston Martin Vanquish. One word: Thunder Kruger Falconbird. Story 5. Former salesperson here. Probably the craziest would be this guy suddenly yelled, "Let's test out the four-wheel drive!" He veered off the road near the dealership and cut donuts in a muddy field. I didn't really give a care if he damaged the truck because that's what insurance and lawyers are for. I just felt bad for the underpaid guys in the back who had to clean it back up. The only time I ever got upset with someone and told them to pull the frick over was this old man was test driving a brand new 2008 Corvette. This guy couldn't drive a manual for crap. He could barely get it out of the parking space. But he managed to get enough momentum to start rolling toward the road, and I noped the F out. I'm curious, why is it always a Corvette that old guys drive when they're having their midlife crisis? I suppose pretty much all older muscle cars are considered midlife crisis cars. Those are the cars that those people had as kids or saw people that they thought were cool driving, and they're trying to relive that. So they buy the car that they had or always dreamed of as a kid, be it a Mustang, a Corvette, or something more exotic. I'd guess today's generations may be something completely different, but the premise will be the same. It was what was sporty when they were young. Of course, that's assuming that you even get to that point that you can afford a nice car in your later years. A bit of high hopes for many of us, sadly. Story 6. Used car dealers in New Jersey here. I was selling a 2006 Honda Odyssey XI, and the only info I get before a test drive is a driver's license and a phone number. The guy said he knew the area, so I let him go alone because we were short-staffed. I told him to keep it short. This jerkwad is gone for 3 hours and ignoring my phone calls. I was about to call the police, but I decided to give him another half hour. He finally came back, and the van was filled with groceries and some stuff from Home Depot. I was ticked off, and he knew it. I'll never forget what he said. "I know you're angry, but before you say anything, I'll buy it." I laughed and held firm on the price, which he didn't seem to have a problem with. Story 7. My mom went into an Audi dealership and was asking about a car that was $80,000. She wasn't planning on stopping by that day, so she was wearing yoga pants and a t-shirt, without any makeup. The car salesman kept trying to push her towards less expensive cars, but she tried them out and didn't like them nearly as much as the others. When my mom finally asked him why he wouldn't show her the car she wanted, he said, "I think that car is too expensive for you." Little did he know that my mom had just empty nested and was looking to finally get a luxury car after decades of buying used Suburbans that had seen better days. Story 8. About 20 years ago, my dad's coworker was with 2 Mexicans that wanted to test drive a car. My dad's coworker was Cuban with blonde hair and blue eyes, so it didn't look like he grew up speaking fluent Spanish. About 5 minutes in, they start talking to each other in Spanish, saying something like, "When we go around the corner is when I get his attention and you shoot him." So the employee opens the door while they're going about 35 miles per hour in a residential area and rolls out of the car and takes off. The car sped off and headed for Mexico. They were eventually caught. I guess they were cartel. Those guys don't mess around. Story 9. I work at a used dealership. We sell all types of vehicles, but our most popular vehicle in this area is a full-size pickup. We always have at least 5 or 10. Early December 2 years ago, we had a dude come in and he was looking around at our cars. He said he was interested in a Focus wagon and wanted to take it for a test drive. "No problem, man. Have a good time." He came back about 45 minutes later, said it wasn't what he was looking for, and rushed off. I went to put the car away and noticed it smelled like pine. The butthole loaded a Christmas tree in the back and took it home, then brought our car back. Why couldn't he have just used a truck? This is a big brain move and a decent life pro tip, if maybe a bit unethical. Why spend $200 to rent a truck for a single hour when you can get the same job done for the low cost of just ticking off a used car salesman? Plus, he kind of did him a favor since now the dealership doesn't have to hang those pine-scented air fresheners. They've got the real deal. Story 10. I left the car business a long time ago, but one customer will be forever seared into my brain. She came in to trade her 6-year-old car in on a new Ford Explorer. I got the car ready and pulled it around front. She climbed in and carefully pulled out into traffic. She asked if we could run an errand. I said, sure. We drove to a house a few minutes away. She got out, took a small bag out of her purse, and placed a used feminine product on the windshield of a car in the driveway, got back in the car, and said, "Screw that hoe." We drove away. She bought the car and was gone a couple hours later. I will never be the same. Story 11. I had a dirty-looking guy with long, greasy hair want to test drive a Cadillac. We had a pre-planned route for test drives, but he turned the opposite way out of the dealership and told me he wanted to go his own way. At this point, he was acting somewhat strange, like nothing specific, just odd mannerisms. We drove a couple miles, and I started getting a bit scared that I was going to be on the 6 o'clock news, when suddenly he pulled into an ice cream place. He bought us both ice cream cones, and we ate them as he checked out the engine. Then we drove back, and he left. It was nice. See, this is why you shouldn't judge a person's character just because they have long, greasy hair. I've been doing a lot of Craigslist exchanges lately, and I'm well aware of the stereotype, depending on whether I'm having a bad hair day or not. I can look like a long-haired bum or a country bumpkin, but luckily most interactions so far, people have deemed me to be trustworthy. Of course, I would never reveal my true devious plotting to them. Story 12. We had a brand new 2014 Audi S4, and it was right after a snowstorm. The kid test driving it was younger and came with cash. We were going for a normal test drive when he went into an open hospital parking lot. At that point, he proceeded to turn off the traction control and start doing donuts as I held on to the "oh, Jesus" handle for my life. After telling him to stop well over 10 times, he stopped and I kicked him out of the driver's seat and drove back. After getting screamed at by our GM, he ended up buying the car. Needless to say, he scared the poop out of me. Could have been worse, though. Story 13. I was showing a car to a guy one day. When I went to go get something, he had opened the hood to look at the engine bay, and he had closed it before I got back. Well, while we were driving on the interstate, sure enough, the hood flew open because he hadn't latched it all the way. It smashed into the windshield, shattering it. We were going really fast, and all of a sudden we couldn't see anything at all. I thought we were goners. But somehow he made it off the road without any further incident. I was also offered favors in a car by an attractive older woman, but didn't do it. Story 14. Thankfully, this did not happen to me. It was one of my salesmen I hired in the past. He had a guy test drive a 5500 Mercedes, only a few years old at the time. He let the gentleman and his wife have it alone, which happens frequently at Highline dealerships. They returned 45 minutes later after a bit of a long test drive. They said the check engine light popped on and the ABS light, and they were scared of the car and left. Come to find out, they removed some $2,500 worth of parts to fix their S500 at a repair shop a few miles away. Thankfully, they were found out and caught. Story 15. Not me, but my friend. He was working at a used car dealership and took out a car with this nerdy-looking guy. A few minutes into the drive, the guy sees his fiancée and another guy entering an apartment complex and flips the frick out, pulls over across the street, runs into the apartment, and demands that she leaves. The guy she's with is pretty dorky as well, and my friend was about to return to the dealership when they start slap fighting like two 12-year-old girls. He watched for like a minute, 'cause then they started crying, then my friend left. Story 16. Kind of on topic. My girlfriend used to manage an enterprise, and she said an old woman brought a car back with the front completely destroyed, and her explanation was that the gate at her development wouldn't open, so she rammed it. It still didn't open, so she rammed it 2 more times. She forgot that the rental car didn't have the little tag that opens the gate, and no one was around to let her in, so she rammed it. From what I'm told, she was very nonchalant about it. Story 17. Took a woman on a test drive. She backed into a fence while turning the car around to go back to the dealership, and when I had to go report it to management when we returned, there was damage. She denied it and quickly jumped into her car and left. That and the guy who just pulled out slowly into 4 lanes of traffic without looking. I've had some fun ones, but those 2 stick in my memory. Story 18. I test drove a sports car once, and the salesman kept telling me to step on the gas so that I could get a good sense of the power. After ignoring him a couple of times, he put his hand on my thigh and pressed my leg down into the accelerator. I instinctively backhanded him with a closed fist and gave him a bloody nose. The rest of the test drive was pretty awkward. Story 19. A few years ago, my dad went to buy a Nissan, and during the test drive, he got this brilliant idea. He He pretended the car was malfunctioning and stopped it. When the salesman got out to see what the problem was, my dad sped away as a joke. When he returned to the dealership 10 minutes later, there were 2 cop cars, and nobody was amused except me. Story 20. Not my story, but at a local Nissan dealer in Queens, 2 very large and intimidating men took a test drive with the salesperson and drove him to The Hole, an area off the parkway that is literally a hole. They told him to get out, and the car was never recovered. He never got an ID before taking the drive and lost his job as a result. Story 21. Friend story. A customer took a Mazda sedan for a test drive and midway pulled over and asked to swap with the salesman to experience the car from the passenger seat. Just as they were about to drive off again, he says he feels sick and can't go on, and thanks for his time. Turns out he just wanted a lift into town. Please leave your stories in the comments. I'd love to make a video of them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.